Growing up, I always felt like a bit of a disappointment to my parents. My mom and dad were hoping for a girl. In fact, they'd been trying for a daughter for years but had no luck until, well, me. They didn't hide the fact that they were disappointed that I was a boy much either. I overheard them say they felt like they'd been given a spare, and I even remember hearing them call me a remnant once. As a kid, that didn't make much sense, but as I got older, it hit me hard. It was obvious that I was just the kid they had while waiting for something better to come along. My parents kept trying for another kid. In fact, it was all they'd ever talk about at family gatherings or when their friends came over. I remember a lot of people telling my parents that they needed to be grateful that they at least had one kid, but my parents would brush them off and tell them that unless it was a girl, they had no kids. Anyway, when I was 15, they finally had my sister, who was also their miracle child. She was everything they'd been hoping for. They poured everything into her. They gave her all of their attention, money, and time. The moment she was born, I pretty much stopped existing in my parents' eyes. I mean, I know I barely existed in their eyes already, but when my sister came along, I was literally invisible. They barely had any time for me, and they made sure that everything that had to do with me was done in a way that made it easier for them to look after my sister. They stopped caring about my hobbies or interests, but they made sure that they showered my sister with praise for every little thing. I knew she was their priority, and I accepted that. I mean, what else could I do? By the time I turned 18, it became pretty clear they didn't want me around anymore. The day of my birthday, my parents sat me down, and it wasn't for any kind of celebration. They told me that they needed more room in the house and that I'd have to move out. Apparently, they thought that by me being there, I was taking away resources from my sister. I tried to explain to them that I didn't have anywhere to go yet and that I just needed a couple of months to save up and find a place. But they weren't interested in anything I had to say. They said I'd had plenty of time to prepare and that I should be able to manage just fine on my own. So, just like that, I was out. I didn't have much. I just had a few bags of clothes and whatever money I could scrape together from odd jobs I'd done in high school. I ended up couch surfing with friends for a bit and then moving into a tiny, rundown apartment. Those first few years were rough. I worked all kinds of jobs, from working night shifts at convenience stores to doing heavy labor on construction sites, just to make ends meet. I never really had a stable job, and I was constantly worried about making rent or affording food. There were nights I'd fall asleep hungry and not knowing if I'd be able to afford my next meal. During that time, I tried to keep in touch with my parents. I don't know why. I know I should have been angry with them, but they were still my parents, and I guess I hoped that they cared about me at least a little bit. I'd call them every once in a while hoping for even a small sign that they missed me. But every conversation was short and awkward, like they were just waiting for it to end. The only reason we spoke was because I was the one reaching out. They never called to check on me or see if I was okay. After 2 years of the same thing, I just stopped calling. It hurt too much to keep putting myself out there when I knew that they didn't really care about me. And they never reached out to me either. They never even sent a message for holidays or birthdays. I figured they had their perfect family now, and I wasn't a part of it. Yeah, it hurt, but I learned to make peace with that. 9 years went by like that. I finally managed to build a stable life for myself. I had a steady job, a small but comfortable place to live, and friends who had become my chosen family. I'd accepted that my parents were out of my life for good. Then, out of nowhere, a few days ago, I got a call from them. I honestly thought something must have happened to one of them, so I picked up. Besides, I hadn't heard their voices in almost 7 years, and they sounded kind of erratic if I'm being honest. They told me that they needed to talk to me about my sister. They went on to very dramatically explain that my sister was going through a rough time and was out of control. I was surprised by that. I mean, she was only 12 or 13. I didn't understand how things could be so bad already, but they told me she was constantly skipping school, getting into fights, and even caught up in some serious trouble. She was already experimenting with substances, hanging out with sketchy people, and just doing things that seemed way out of hand for someone her age. Apparently, they had to spend a ton of money getting her out of trouble. They tried to put her in different programs and paid for all these counseling sessions that ended up not really doing much for my sister. I was floored. I mean, I get that teenagers can be difficult, but it was hard to picture a kid that young spiraling so much. It sounded like all the years of spoiling her had finally caught up with them, but I couldn't wrap my head around how bad things had gotten. After telling me all of this, my parents told me that I needed to help them out. They wanted me to come back into their lives to support them, both emotionally and financially. They explained that taking care of my sister had taken a massive toll on them and that they just couldn't handle it anymore. It was like they expected me to drop everything, forgive all the years of neglect and rejection, and somehow step in to make things right. They tried to guilt trip me by saying I was still their son and that family needed to be there for each other in hard times. I was shocked to hear about what my sister had been turned into, but hearing them not even asking but demanding that I help them made me furious. Where was that family needs to stick together mindset when I was 18 and begging them to let me stay? Where was all this concern when I was sleeping on friends' couches and struggling to get by? They'd tossed me out without a second thought, and now, just because things had gone south for them, they wanted me to swoop in and save the day? I told them no and that I wasn't interested in helping them. I said I'd built a life for myself without their help, and I didn't see why I should put myself in a difficult position now just because they'd raised my sister to be a nightmare. They did not take that well. They called me selfish and ungrateful. They said that I was abandoning them in their time of need. They then accused me of holding a grudge and said I should be willing to help because they were still my family. After listening to them rant for a while, I just hung up. I didn't want to hear it. I knew I'd made the right decision. But it's been a few days now since that call. They still haven't stopped trying to reach out to me. My mom texted me and asked me if I'd be willing to hear them out over dinner this weekend, but honestly, I don't know. I know that I don't owe them anything after the way they treated me all my life, but a part of me still feels guilty. I can't shake the feeling that maybe I'm in the wrong and that maybe they're right and I should be a bigger person and help them out despite everything they've done. I keep thinking about it, and it's messing with my head. I can't help but wonder if I was too harsh with them. Part of me thinks that they made their bed and should lie in it. But another part of me wonders if I'll regret this decision down the road. Ida for refusing to help my parents after everything they put me through? Update 1. Hey, everyone. I wanted to give an update because things have definitely moved forward since my last post. Also, I saw a lot of questions in the comments, so I'll try to clear up a few things first. A lot of people asked why I don't just cut my sister off, too, and if I blame her for any of this. I want to make it clear that I don't really have any negative feelings toward my sister herself. I don't know her at all, really she was a baby when I left, and I haven't been around since. To me, she's just a kid I never got to know, and any anger or resentment I feel isn't directed at her. It's my parents I'm mad at for how they treated me, and for how they made me feel like I didn't matter once she came along. They're the ones who ignored me, kicked me out, and now expect me to come back and save them. I also saw some questions about what my parents were like when I was growing up and if there were specific things that made me feel unwanted. It's honestly tough to talk about, but I think it's important to help you all understand why I feel this way. My parents weren't outright abusive, but they definitely made it clear that I was more of a disappointment than anything else. They wanted a girl so badly and openly talked about it. I remember them saying things like, "We waited for our miracle baby," while referring to my sister, and treating me like I was just there in the meantime. Once my sister came along, they seemed like they finally got what they always wanted, and everything I did was ignored. If I got a good grade, no one noticed. If I had a big moment, like a graduation or an award, it was barely mentioned or even acknowledged. And then, after she was born, it was like they couldn't wait for me to just leave. They saw me as the extra they didn't need, which is probably why they kicked me out as soon as I turned 18. Anyway, I hope that clears things up. Now, here's the actual update. After reading your comments, I decided to take some advice and reach out to my parents. A lot of you suggested that if I wanted closure or to get a better idea of what they wanted from me, I should meet them in a neutral location. So, I ended up asking my parents if they'd be willing to meet at a coffee shop in town. They agreed, and I showed up with the mindset that this was going to be just a talk and not me jumping in to fix anything. I was still pretty angry, but I wanted to see what they had to say. When I got there, I could see right away that they weren't in good shape. They looked tired and much older than I remembered. Not to mention, they looked really stressed out. They wasted no time and got straight into it. They began begging me for help. They gave me more information than they did the last time we spoke. Apparently, my sister's issues are worse than I initially thought. Beyond the substance use and legal trouble, she's had to go to multiple rehab programs, all of which they've had to pay for out of pocket. She's been skipping school, sneaking out, and causing trouble with friends who are a terrible influence. My parents said that they tried everything they could to change this behavior, but nothing has apparently worked. It turns out they've sold a lot of their things, including my childhood home, to cover these expenses. They're living in a small apartment now and struggling to make ends meet because of all the costs they've taken on to save my sister. They even talked about selling some family heirlooms to scrape together more money, which they think will only last a few more months. Now, they're at a point where they're truly desperate, and they said that they needed my help to get back on their feet. But while I felt sorry for them, I couldn't help but feel like there was this underlying expectation from them. They kept bringing up the fact that we were family and that I was their son and that it was my duty to help out. It was almost like they thought that no matter what they'd done in the past, I would still step up because of some duty I supposedly have. The way they were talking made me feel like they hadn't really processed the hurt they caused me or even acknowledged the fact that they'd treated me poorly. They just kept pushing the idea that I should help them now because they're my parents, and it's what's right. As they kept going, I could feel all these old feelings of anger and resentment coming up. It was clear to me that they didn't see any of this as their fault. They brushed off the fact that they kicked me out and said that it was just parenting and that they'd done what was best for the family at the time. They acted like it was normal to treat me that way, and now they were expecting me to just forgive everything and swoop in to fix things. I realized that they weren't looking for forgiveness or understanding. They were looking for a solution. And to them, that solution was me. They needed someone to take on the financial burden of all the decisions they'd made over the years. Listening to them speak only made me angrier and more upset with them. They still didn't get it. They still didn't understand that they'd pushed me away so hard that I barely knew them anymore. They didn't understand what family meant at all, and they still insisted that I treat them like family. I let them finish talking, but I told them that I couldn't help them. I explained that I'd worked hard to build a life on my own after they left me stranded and that I wasn't in a position, financially or emotionally, to support them. I said I didn't feel any sense of obligation to bail them out of a mess they'd created by themselves. They were furious. They told me I was being selfish, that I was abandoning my family, and that I was heartless for not helping my sister. I could see the anger and disappointment in their eyes, and it was like looking back into the past. It was like nothing had changed. They were still trying to guilt me into feeling like I owed them something. I ended up leaving that meeting feeling a lot more conflicted than when I went in. Part of me is relieved that I set a boundary and stood up for myself, but another part of me feels guilty, like maybe I'm turning my back on them when they're at their lowest. It's hard to explain, but even though I know they hurt me, it still feels strange to walk away like this. I keep thinking about their situation and about my sister, who I don't even know. I feel sorry for her, but I don't feel like I can save her. It's painful to realize that even after all these years, my parents don't see me as an individual with my own life and struggles, but instead just as someone whom they can use to fix their problems. I'm trying to let go of the guilt, but it's hard. So, I guess I'm back here to ask if I made the right call by sticking to my decision. Am I wrong for feeling this way? Update 2. Hey, everyone. I'm back again because things have gotten even crazier since my last update, which was only about a week ago. Honestly, I thought things would settle down after I decided not to help my parents financially, but I was way off. Just a few hours ago, I got a call from my sister. This is the first time I've ever heard from her directly, and it completely caught me off guard. I barely even know her. I only have these vague memories from when she was a baby, right before I left home. So when I picked up the phone and heard her voice, I was stunned. I had no idea what to expect, but I figured maybe she wanted to reach out and talk to me considering my parents did. The call started out okay. She was polite and almost sweet, which was surprising given everything I'd heard about her behavior. She asked me to lend our parents money to help them with their current situation. I could tell she'd rehearsed this pitch because she was laying it on thick about how they were struggling and how I could save the family. But I stood my ground and told her that I wasn't able to help them financially. I tried to keep my tone respectful and explained that my relationship with our parents was complicated and that I had to make decisions that were best for me. That's when everything flipped. She went from polite to furious in seconds. She started accusing me of being selfish and abandoning her with all the responsibility of dealing with our parents. She kept saying that I was turning my back on my family and had always been jealous of her. She claimed that I was acting like I was better than them because I got away and started my own life, while they'd been the ones supporting me all along. It was shocking to hear her talk like this. It was almost as if she'd rehearsed these words too. I mean, she sounded just like our parents. Besides, she sounded so entitled to my help. It was like she genuinely believed it was my job to step in and fix everything. I was so taken aback that I couldn't even respond. Here was this person I'd never had a relationship with, demanding that I make up for years of choices I had nothing to do with. After she finished her rant, she hung up before I could even process what had just happened. After the call, I knew I needed to talk to my parents to figure out what was going on. I was so confused. Like, why did my sister think I'd abandon her, and where was all this hostility and anger towards me coming from? I called my parents, and as soon as they picked up, I asked them straight up if they'd been telling my sister that I'd abandoned her and them. At first, they hesitated, but they quickly admitted that they'd told her for years that I'd left the family because I couldn't handle sharing their attention with her. They'd basically made me seem like I was a selfish older brother who couldn't deal with having a younger sibling and had cut ties with them out of spite. Honestly, I felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me when I heard this. All these years, my parents have been feeding my sister this twisted version of why I left and made me out to be some kind of villain. No wonder she felt like I'd abandoned her. She'd grown up hearing that I left because I didn't want to share my parents' attention. Meanwhile, the reality was that my parents made me feel like an outsider from the moment she was born, and they didn't hesitate to kick me out as soon as I was legally an adult. I pretty much hung up on them after that, and they haven't tried to reach out again yet. Then again, it's only been a few hours since I last spoke to them. Aside from that, I honestly don't know how to feel right now. On one hand, I'm angry at my parents for lying to my sister about me and for making her think that I was the one who walked away. But I'm also frustrated with my sister for lashing out at me and demanding that I help them as if I owe it to her. It's hard to shake off this resentment I'm feeling, but now I'm also feeling guilty in a way I can't fully explain. I wish my parents had told her the truth about why I left. Maybe if they had, things would be different between me and my sister. I may not have been able to help my parents financially, but I definitely would have been able to get through to my sister and help her change her behavior. But now, it feels like there's too much damage to fix. I'm not even sure if I want to. This whole situation is so exhausting because just when I thought that I was done with my family for good, they came back in the worst possible way. I know a lot of comments have asked me to just block my parents and move on, but it's not like that for me. Call me what you want, but this is still family and I feel like I need to know what's going on at the very least. I really am in no position to help my family out, but this is the first time that they've reached out to me and a part of me is happy about that. Still, I know that I definitely won't reach out to them first or help them out in any way. Only because, it's clear to me that my parents are still trying to manipulate the situation to get what they want, and my sister is too wrapped up in their version of the story to see things differently. I don't know what else to do. Update 3, hey, everyone. It's been a few months since my last update, and I've had a lot of time to reflect and let things settle down. Honestly, it's been a lot quieter for me, but only because I made the choice to stay out of the mess my parents and sister have created. I'm learning that sometimes the best way to find peace is by just stepping back and not letting their drama take up space in my life anymore. After my last update, things didn't really get any better with parents. About a month after I last updated on here, they called me again. I was dreading it, but I picked up because I wanted to hear what they had to say. This time they were even more desperate than before. And they used everything they could think of to guilt me into giving them money. They talked about how bad things were, how they were on the verge of losing everything, and how they needed me to step in and fix it. The usual, really. At first, they tried the whole family is supposed to stick together guilt trip. They even threatened that they were going to my life miserable if I didn't help them. They then switched tones and said that I was the only one who could help them now. Honestly, I was pretty disgusted. After everything that happened, they still had the audacity to threaten me, and not once did they stop to think about how badly they treated me. I stood my ground. I told them I couldn't help them financially, and that it wasn't my job to fix their problems. I reminded them that they made these choices, and it wasn't on me to clean up the mess. They weren't happy about that, obviously. They kept calling for the next month and trying to guilt trip me some more. It felt like they didn't even care to understand why I was refusing to help. They just saw me as a means to an end. Eventually, they stopped calling. I figured that they realized I wasn't budging. For a month, I didn't hear anything from them, and honestly, I thought that might be the end of it. But then, just about a week ago, I got another call. I almost didn't pick up, but I was curious to know what had happened. Turns out, things have only gotten worse for them. They told me they had to declare bankruptcy. They'd sold almost everything they had to cover their debts, and they were basically starting over with nothing. And then they mentioned my sister. She had apparently cut contact with them completely and moved in with one of her friends, apparently someone who supported her bad behavior. She's only 13, but somehow, she managed to move out and live with a friend's family who was just as enabling as she was. I don't understand how that happened, but I guess it's another example of how messed up everything has gotten. I asked my parents why they didn't get the authorities involved, and they told me that it was for the best that my sister no longer lived with them because they couldn't see themselves helping her out anymore. So, they basically abandoned their second child as well. At first, my parents tried to put the blame on me. They said that if I had just helped them out when they asked, none of this would have happened. They said I was the reason everything went downhill. Of course, they couldn't admit that they were responsible for their own actions. I was beyond mad. I told them straight up that everything happening to them was a result of their own decisions and the way they treated me. I reminded them of how they kicked me out when I turned 18, how they treated me like a second-class citizen in my own home, and how they ignored me when I needed them. I reminded them about how they didn't even acknowledge how that affected me, and instead, they just kept trying to shift the blame onto me. That's when they finally stopped making excuses and started backtracking. They apologized and said that they regretted everything they did to me. They told me they wished they had done things differently. It felt like they were saying all the right things, but it was too little, too late. I couldn't just forget how they had treated me for years, and I couldn't erase the fact that they had destroyed two lives, mine and my sister's. They had pushed me away and now, they were reaping the consequences of that. I felt pity for them. I honestly did. But at the same time, I knew that I couldn't sacrifice the life I'd built for myself to try to fix things that were already broken. I told them I couldn't offer any help and that I needed to keep my distance. They were upset, but I stayed firm in my decision. After I hung up, I still felt very angry at them for what they did to me, but at the same time, I was sad for them. I wish they had taken the time to see what they were doing when they had the chance. But now, it's too late. I've made my peace with the fact that I can't save them, and that's something I'm learning to live with. I don't know what the future holds for them or for my sister. All I know is that I'm not going to let their mistakes ruin my peace. I've come too far to let them pull me back into their chaos. Maybe over time, I'll try to reach out to my sister again and see if I can help get her on the right track, but for now, I have much bigger things to worry about. I can only hope that she learns the right things until then. So, yeah. That's about it from me. It'll be a long while before I check in on my family again. I know this isn't exactly the happiest ending, but it's something that I've made peace with. Thank you so much for all the advice in the comments.